Let's now come to the topic: your investments could disappear if you don't do dash dash dash. So it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent that survive. It is one of the most adaptable to change. So Darwin's theory, basically, either you will adapt to the changing situations or you will not survive. That is very much sort of implementable in the market as well. Those who stay adamant about their stocks or about their thesis without realizing that the market is changing, or maybe the sector is changing, maybe the leadership in that particular sector is changing, are going to succumb and not survive. While those who will adapt to the changing marketplace, whether it is downward market, upward market, which sectors in the market are performing, which stocks of which sector are performing, that adaptation is very very essential to really win in the marketplace. So, what is survivorship bias? This is basically a tendency to view the performance of existing stocks and assuming that these were the stocks that have always been there. But the reality is that what stocks that you see today have survived, all the onslaughts of the market in the past, and several of the stocks who have not survived are not even there in front of you. So, our view about the market today is incomplete if we don't look at the stocks that started 10 years back, 20 years back, 30 years back, 40 years back, and could not survive this time. And we could have been invested in those stocks also. Today, when we look at today's performers and see that, oh, we should have bought it in 2008, we should have bought Infosys at that point, we should have bought Wipro at that point. These are the survivors of the market. You cannot base your thesis based on the survivors. You have to actually go and see what was the exact nature and the composition of the market. So this is a classical survivorship bias study where it was in the Second World War, when the planes were coming back after an attack on them to the military bases. It was studied that the most bullets were in the tail area or on the wings, and they reinforced those areas to make sure that there will be lesser and lesser damage. They did not consider the fact that there will be a significant number of other planes that never came back to the bases, and the mathematicians assumed that all the hits were happening only in those areas of the survivors. So that is the classical example of how to not see the current set as a real set, but only as a surviving species out of the entire thesis. Just again, simply when you say something like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of college and became wildly successful, right? So that cannot become the norm, that if you are if you have dropped out of college, then the success is likely to happen. But for most college dropouts, it means unemployment and having more immediate student debt. So Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and Mark Zuckerberg may be the survivors of the difficult race of going from college to later on. Similarly, in sports, like Messi, Ronaldo, Neymar are getting paid highly as football players, but the truth is that 99.99% players who start off from school level, university level, club level, and national level never really make it to the final level of the game in their lifetime. So you never consider them as uh, part of the current mix, and you say, I mean, if I were Messi, I would be making so much money, that kind of a thing. The same applies to companies. So companies also are becoming the landscape is becoming hyper competitive. So the average company lifespan on S&P 500 in the last 60 odd years is also reducing. It used to be 35-40 years at one point of time that an average company would last this much. Now it is down to teens. So an average company does not last 20 years right now, from that perspective. And and hence you cannot rely on today's set of companies to give you that results 10 or 20 years later, because it's a very dynamic world. It may not survive. Let's look at this list from Equity Master. This is showing you a list of stocks, 30 stocks, and this is the original composition of Sensex when it was compiled in 1986. There are stocks like Balarpur Industries. There are stocks like Indian Rayon, Indian Organics, Premier Auto, Pico Electronics, uh, Mukund Limited. Several of these stocks, either have vanished or did not perform so well in the long term. And this era basically is dynamic. There will be, market disruptions, technology disruptions, different styles of management, different companies having a advantage of low cost capital or geographical. So basically, the fact is that the composition of the indices also will evolve over time. So if this was 1980, then there was textile dominance at that point of time. Textile stocks led the Sensex with 24% weight. Can you imagine that now? Now, major groups were the legacy of major groups was there: Tata, Birla's, Reliance, and they began their journey in textiles with iconic brands like Sarab Bhai's, Modi's, and Mafatlals once ruling the industry. That has just vanished away. By 1992, Sensex had transformed into a more of a ex-textile era, and newer companies, more energy oriented companies came in, where there was a time in 1992 where market cap was concentrated by Tatas and Birlas, accounting for 45% of the Sensex market cap. Um, by also, the manufacturing centric world was starting to take over cement, textiles, metals, and or automobiles, and there was no financial services or IT by this time. But then again, a decade later, you saw a lot of those kind of companies come in, NITs of the world, Renbex, research orientation, pharma. Then you had energy and petroleum, uh, companies like MTNL came through, BSES, so on and so forth. So a lot of economic liberalization, and change of industrial players like Hindustan Motors, Premier Auto, who were thriving earlier, but then could not adapt to the changing world. And then, of course, new sectors, the telecom sector, the IT sector, Ztele, Infosys, Satyam, they rose to prominence. And by 2012, the Sensex changed another, lot many stocks, where you had a lot more pharma come through, IT come through, banking and finance also came through in a big way to 20, by 2012. Then by 2012, banking finance had dominated the index at 27%. In 1992, there was zero financial stocks, and by now, in 20 years, you had 27% makeup of the Sensex at financial stocks. IT stocks, which were zero, became weightages at 13%. Bharti Airtel, which was listed in 2001, became the first company of telecom era to come on to Sensex. And traditional stocks, FMCG, oil, gas, metals, and pharmaceutical, continued to have a continuous presence there. And by 2022, again, there was more shifts that happened. Banking stocks with assets of 2.9 lakh crores grew 57 times over these 30 years. Private banks and finance companies became more and more dominant in the Sensex. 9 out of 30 Sensex companies from banking and finance space. And since 2012, five new financial firms: Axis, Bajaj Finance, Bajaj Finserv, IndusInd, and Kotak Mahindra have been added to the Sensex. So you can see how dynamically, from time to time, the index is changing. There are stocks that survive, and there are stocks that we don't talk about today because they have not survived. Even in the Nifty, if you go back, you will see stocks like Unitech, India Bulls, a lot more stocks that I can talk about, which have got famished from the index, and we never talk about them. But had you invested in those stocks, considering them as leaders of that time, and blindly held on to them, your portfolio would not be the same as of today. So what will be those sectors that will perform in the next many decades? What will be the sectors that will come into the index? We don't know that, right? So while the world is constantly evolving, and we need to keep adapting to the change. So if we don't adapt, we perish, basically. I mean, if we become adamant about that, no, I will only invest in these five stocks, and that's it, and I don't really care. Now, you may wait for 5 years, you may wait for 10 years for those stocks to perform, but after 10 years, perhaps you will realize that I should have made this adaptation 5 years back, 7 years back, 8 years back, and I've lost 7 8 years of my precious opportunity cost of my capital. So approach to the market also has to be adaptive in nature. Momentum strategies, of course, adapt to the changes as it happens. When markets come down, they will go to cash, or they will go to relatively stronger stocks, and then when once market takes off, they will again allocate to stocks or go again into stocks that are doing well, regardless of which sectors take off. So the new sectors that take off actually will be the first in your portfolio, because you are not fixated upon any particular sector or any particular stock, and you remain agnostic to that. So let me know in the comments, do you think your strategy should remain adaptive, and how do you handle the changes that are happening in the landscape in your own thesis and investing style, do let me know. And thank you so much for watching, and do like and share this video if you liked it, and do subscribe to the channel. Thanks. Bye.